Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for watching, whether you are watching here live with me or you are watching the recording later on. I always appreciate you guys getting involved. Today, all we're going to do is we're just going to do a little coding for a little while. I think, that's fun to do sometimes. We're going to go into kind of writing a program with a purpose. And in doing so, we'll learn about a few other features of P5JS that we didn't learn about last time, so that you can incorporate them potentially into what you're working on. One of the things that we'll be doing is, looking at adding images to something. Another thing would be looking at how to use key press events, that sort of thing, to just make things happen quickly and easily. But before we do that, just a couple of announcements. So this is our last kind of content week. So you've got your final assignments due on Sunday if you want to get them done earlier, so you can kind of enjoy the holiday weekend. That's fine by me. And then that's really the last of the content for the course. Everything else is just to be dedicated to your final project. And that final project is a game, and you got one example of how to make a game in the module. Next week, I'll be doing the game jam, so you can tune into the live stream next time. And I'll be making a game from beginning to end on the live stream. And, again, remember that these games don't have to be complicated. They don't have to be over the top, right? And you can, if you find a tutorial that you like somewhere, you can follow that. I don't mind that for this game. All that really means something to me in that issue is that you do a little something, you take some kind of twist, put some kind of twist on it to make it different from wherever you got it from. I mentioned the Coding Train website. That's where a lot of the videos came from in the module. That's a great resource for this, and we'll be doing, the game jam, where we'll have another example of something completely different. There's a lot of examples out there, and, you're welcome to kind of do what you want. Just so long as you put a little bit of twist on it. That's all I ask. Right, so I think that's all of the announcements really that I have for you for today. And so today we're going to build a program. We're going to build a program with a bit of a specified purpose to it, because I was trying to think of today, what was something that could be kind of fun that we could do, that we could see, other features utilized in, and some different things. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to build a Cleveland Community College CCC Yeti desktop wallpaper generator, right? That'll give you a custom desktop wallpaper whenever you press a key on your keyboard. And when you find one that you like, it'll just keep refreshing until you find one that you like. And then once you find one that you like, you can press S on your keyboard to save it. Right? Because remember that that's one of the great things about the canvas is that I can save what's on my canvas. I can do it by a right-click Save As sort of function in my browser, but I can also use a function in P5JS to go ahead and save that canvas for me. So that's pretty cool, right? And so we're going to do that today. Essentially, the goal of what we're going to be getting at, just so you can kind of see an example of where we're trying to go, is something that looks kind of like this, right? This was an example that I pulled out of when I was kind of doing some test things earlier. So what we might make might look a little different, might have some different features to it. But you can see here that we're using like the college's colors. We've got a nice logo there in the middle, and then we're doing something with some randomized shapes kind of filling in the rest of the space here on that desktop wallpaper. And so what I'd also like to try to do, that'll be a little bit different from what we've done, or rather what I've done in my sample that I have over here on my other monitor in my notes, is to use multiple logos. So you could get this logo that's on this current background here, or you could get another logo that I have baked into the project file. So you can probably kind of see where we're going here. We're going to do some randomized colors. We're going to do some randomized sizes. We're going to need to make some kind of shape object to handle our shapes. In this case, we'll do circles, but we could also do a little something to where we could kind of combine circles and squares with a conditional or something like that. So in this example today, we're going to use objects. We're going to use arrays. We're going to use variables, of course, all sorts of stuff to make this happen. We're going to work with a key press event today. I know we looked at like a button event last time, or we've looked at a button event in some different ways. So we're going to work on our on a key press event today. So that's going to be the goal of what we are trying to do today, is to make a wallpaper like this. So let's close that out. Let's start to make our own. So I'm starting out here on the P5JS website because I have my project file. I have my project folder opened here. I don't have any files loaded in my project file yet, except for my images, which we'll look at those in just a second. So I guess let's go ahead and start building out this project. Right, so we're going to add an index.html, and we're going to add a sketch.js. And remember, we talked about this last time. Like, I can name this file essentially whatever I want to name this file. Right, whether it's script.js, sketch.js. I like to have it as sketch.js when I'm doing P5, just because that's technically what it's called when we're working on the canvas in P5 is a sketch. So, just in case I have to have any other files in there, then I might want to do that. What's interesting is I might want to do something just a little bit different today for file management, and I might want to add another file here. Because one of the things that's commonly done when we're working with like objects and stuff is that you'll use a separate file for the object that you create, and then when you load that file in, it'll work just like anything else. So I'm going to create a shapes object here today. So I'm going to create another new file here, and we're going to call it capital S shapes.js. And so we'll put our object in here for our shapes class when we get to that part in just a little bit. Right, so what we want to do here is we want to start out by just adding our HTML skeleton. We'll use emit here in P5JS to do that. We will take our document here and we'll rename it. This will now be named CCC Desktop Wallpaper Generator. Right, and so the next thing that we want to do is we want to include our CDN for P5JS. Remember that we can do that by visiting the P5JS website, clicking the download button, which I already have open in a tab here. And then we'll just use the CDN here. So we'll follow this CDN link. And then I can just copy the library here. I'll use the uncompressed library to start out with. And then when we're finished and we're ready for it to go, we'll switch over to the minified library. So I'll start out by using the full-size library here. So we'll copy that script tag. And we will put that in the head of our document. Like so. And so now we can put references to our other two JavaScript files in the body of our document. Since our sketch file is going to make reference to our shapes file, we need to make sure our shapes file is loaded first. So we're going to put our shapes file first in our markup here. So script src equals shapes.js /script. And then another one for script src equals sketch.js. And we'll close that script. We'll go ahead and save this while we're at it. And we'll go ahead and run our live server. So we will open with live server here. So this is where our game, or in this case, it's not a game, it's a wallpaper generator, where it's going to be. And so now let's go over to our sketch.js file, and we will start to work with that here. And so let's add in our primary functions that we need to get started with a P5.js program here, and that's our setup function and our draw function. So we'll add our setup. We'll add function setup, and let me zoom in here a little bit so you all can see this a little bit better. We'll add function setup, and we will add function draw. Now, in this program, we don't technically need our draw function. We don't want to use that game loop that our draw function gives to us. So for all intents and purposes, we could not have our draw function here. We could delete our draw function. I'm just going to comment our draw function out because we don't need our draw function for this example. Remember that we use this draw function because it's a game loop, right? It is going to be a constantly looping function. So if you need something that is interactive or something that's going to animate, especially if you're going to use something that's going to animate, we want to use this draw function for that. Otherwise, if we don't need to worry about it looping, we can put it into just the setup function and let the setup function work. So that's what we want to do here. Let's create our canvas. We can create our canvas in our setup function, and we can also give our canvas a background color in our setup function. So we're going to create canvas. If we were going to get a little more advanced with this, like we could do something with like checkboxes or buttons or something that could change the values that we put in here, right, to be different sized wallpapers for different monitors. But we're going to keep it simple today. We're just going to use one standard size, and that's going to be our 1080p, which is 1920 by 1080. So you could also do this for phone wallpapers or whatever. Like the same basic thing kind of works. You just have to change up how big your canvas is for whatever monitor size you're shooting for, right? So we're just going to keep it simple, and we're going to shoot for 1080p. We're going to add a background to this, and we're going to add the CCC dark blue as the background. So we'll add background and give it that background color. In this case, we're going to give it the background color of 04344E. That's that dark blue that you see in the new CCC logo there. So if we save this and we have a look at our site now, we should see we've got a nice big blue square here. Nice big blue rectangle. This is our canvas. And we can see it goes outside of the page because this monitor is a 1080p monitor. So, if we factor in the bezel of my monitor viewport and all that kind of stuff, right, we've got all this extra room. Right, like there are other things to where we could kind of make it fit on the same page if we wanted to and still have an output of a 1920 by 1080. But again, we're keeping it simple. We're just getting started learning this stuff. So we're going to keep it, minimal here, right? So let's go back to our sketch. Now the thing that I want to do is I want to add the picture, right? We have a logo in the middle there. And we're going to add 2 logo files into this project. So if we look in my project here, I have an images folder. Oh, it looks like I've accidentally put everything here in the images folder. That's fine. I'll fix it before I... you know what? It's fine. We'll just roll with it. We've got logo 1 and logo 2. Right, so if we click on these, we can see them inside of VS Code. This is logo 1. That's the logo that you saw in the demo. earlier. And logo 2 is a slightly different logo. All right, one of the things that we've done here just to make life easy on us is we've made them the same size in their image. So this is a 400 by 517 pixel image for both of these. You know, I kind of just took this one that was a little differently shaped and put it into a different sized canvas, just so we wouldn't have to worry about changing any code for our placement. And so let's start out by just adding these images in. And so for our images here, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a variable container for them so that we can have a place to put them. And we'll need to load them into our sketch using the P5JS preload function. So let's create two variables here. We'll create a variable img1, and we'll create a variable img2. And these are going to be our two images. And, you know, we'll do something a little fancy to get them to show up on our canvas when we get to that point, so we can pick between one or the other. Right? But we also want to write our preload function, which is going to be function preload. And we can load one to img1. In this case, we have logo 1 and logo 2, so img1 will be logo1.png. And actually, we need to put the load image function around that. I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's going to be load, capital I image, logo1.png. And we're going to do img2 equals load image logo2.png. So now that we have both of these images kind of preloaded, one of the things that we could do from here is put them in an array, right? And we can use this array to select a random number from the array and pull that back as the image that we'll be using. So let's create an array inside of here. I think this will work. This might not work. We might have to go back and change this up just a little bit. Because like the smarter thing might be to put it in our setup function. So yeah, let's do that. Let's put it in our setup function. We'll create a variable in our setup function for our array. This will be, we'll call it logos. And we'll set it equal to img1, img2. And to make things like more random, because if we just used a random number function here, it would give us img1 way more than it would give us img2. So just to make it a little more fair, I'm just going to put img2 in there twice. Right, so now when we select a random number, we can select it between 0 and 2. If we wanted to, we could put img1 in there again. In fact, you know what? Let's do that. img1. So now we'll select, we'll select a random number between 0 and 4, or 3 rather. And whatever number that will be the image that we load onto our canvas. So now that we can, now that we have that, we can add our image. So in, down below our background here, we will, we're going to give ourselves a little space because we're going to want to put our circles between our background and our image. So we're going to give ourselves a little room to work here, just so we have a place to put those circles. And I'll put our image function here, which if you want to look at this image function, right, just so we can kind of go back to something here, and I'll go ahead and save while we're doing this. If we look at our P5JS reference here, we can look for images, which are in image. Right, and these are actually, image here is actually for saving the canvas, which we'll do later. But we have this load image, which we used already, and this image for when we want to actually insert the image into our document onto our canvas, right? So with our image here, we have 3 arguments that we put into the function. If we click this, we can actually see that. And we can see kind of the process here. Like we've already done the preload step where we're loading our image. And then with our image, we put the image that we want to load and then an X and Y location. So in my program here, I want to let it choose kind of a random image for me. So I'm going to use my array to do that. So here in image, we're going to put, and let's lowercase that. That's Visual Studio's IDE thinking it knows more than me. And we're going to take our logos and we're going to reference an index location that's going to be math.random, math.floor times 3. Right, so this will give us a number between 0 and 3. And so that will reference our logos array here and give us either logo 1 or logo 2. And so now we'll just add the rest of the code here, which is the X and Y location. I already did the math for this just to save us a little bit of time. Right, I divided the width of our canvas by 2 and then subtracted the width of our image size, which got me 760 pixels. And I did the same thing for the Y location. I took the height of our canvas, which is 1080, divided it by 2, and subtracted the height of our image, which is 517. So that left me with 281. And so that'll take and that'll put our image on the screen. So we've got this preload function that's bringing, we've created these variable containers. We've loaded an image, preloaded an image into these variable containers. We put those into an array. And then we're using a little random number generator to grab a random logo, show it on our screen at this precise location that we're referencing here. So it'll put it right in the center. So we saved that. So now we can go back to our wallpaper app here. And oh, it doesn't like something. Let's see what it doesn't like. We'll inspect it. And we'll check our console. It might not like using the array. We'll find out. Cannot read properties of undefined reading width. Oh, we've made a little mistake here somewhere. Line 15. Let's take out our random one here and let's just put a static there. And we'll save that and see if that does anything for us. And it looks like it does. So there's where we're getting a little bit of issue here. Although that should work. You know what would be better? You know what would definitely work is if we took this random number and we generated it and just put the random number in there. So we created a variable called logo selection, and we set it equal to that math.floor math.random times 3. Right, and then we can put that logo selection value into here. And that will get us what we want. So now if we save this, head back to our desktop wallpaper, we see we already have the other logo here. And if we refresh it, we'll get our choice of, you know, maybe 1 or 2 wallpapers or logos randomly on our wallpaper. So that's pretty cool. All right, it's going to give us one or the other logo, which I think is pretty neat. And that's just another way that we can kind of increase the randomization here, right? Like when I was doing this initially, I had just done it with one logo. And then right before the stream started, I was like, well, what if we could do it with more than one logo? And so that's what we have here. So Now we kind of have this foundation for our logo or for our wallpaper here. And so now we can do our other stuff with our shapes. Right, and so that's going to be cool. So now I can head back to my project. And I said I was going to do my object in my shapes file. Right, just so we can kind of have this object separated from the rest of our code. Since we've loaded both files into our HTML file, it'll still be able to read both just fine. But this keeps all of that object code out of my sketch, so it keeps it a little cleaner, right? And then everything that's in the shapes.js file will be part of my class shapes. Right, so we'll use a constructor to build this. And we're going to take, and we're going to just essentially take 3 random numbers to help us make our shape. So this is going to be this.x. That's going to be our x location. It's going to be a random number between 0 and 1920. And so we have 2 different ways that we can define a random number here. We have the regular way, right, which is the way we just did it here in our sketch. And this is going to get me a random whole number. 0, 1, 2, or 3. I believe the random method in P5JS can also give you a floating point number, if I'm not mistaken, which is why we don't want to do that with an array, because it'll give you a decimal floating point number, so it won't be exact. But if you added a math.floor around this, then you could still do that as well. Like if you did like a math.floor like that, that's going to give you a whole number. In fact, I'll just leave it like that because that's more interesting, right? So we'll also do this for y. This dot y equals math dot floor random 0 to 1080. So those are going to be our x and y locations. And so we need a diameter, we need a size for our circle. So we'll say this dot d is math.floor random. I kind of want a lot of variation in my circle size, and my my canvas is pretty large, right? So we can start at like maybe 50 or 100. I'm gonna start at 50, I think, and maybe go all the way up to like 750 here. So I can have a pretty small circle on my page. I can have a very large circle on my page. Either way, right? So let's semicolon that. So these will make up the 4 arguments that we need to display our circle, right? So if we go into our object here, we create a new display function, or this is technically a display method of our shapes class. We can create our ellipse with this dot x, comma this dot y, comma this dot d, comma this dot d. So remember, that's giving me my x location, my y location, and then the height and the width of my circle. Right, so this is already something that we can pull into our sketch file. Right, I'm going to go ahead and close this logo here really quickly. And remember that we want to do this before our image because we want our image loaded after our logo, so it'll be on top. Or after our shape, so it'll be on top. And in fact, I actually put this in another function in my sketch, or in my my notes here. So I think I want to do that here as well. Let's create an array called circles and set that equal to an empty array for right now. And now let's create a function. And actually, let me just go down in my notes here just so I can make sure I'm seeing everything correctly. Now let's create a new function. And we'll call this function make circles. Why not? And we'll use kind of like what we did last time when we created those multiple bouncing balls that bounced around our canvas. We will take and we'll push circles to this array that we just made. So we'll push a new shapes object for however many circles we want to make here. So when I was testing earlier, I was doing 100. So let's continue that. Let I equal 0. I is less than 100. I plus plus. For that, we will push a new shapes object to our circles array. So that's circles dot push new shapes. And so that will create a new instance of 100 circles and put them on our canvas. And then we can display them. So we can write another for loop here for let circle of circles. We will circle dot display. Now we haven't done anything with color yet on our circles. We're just essentially generating circles here. So it's going to look bad right now, but what we want to see is we want to see a bunch of circles on our screen. And then we can start to make it look better after we see that work. Right? So let's save this. Head over to our application here. Looks like there might be a little issue here. Let's inspect, see what we might have... Oh, you know what we did wrong? We didn't... There's actually nothing wrong. We did it right. We just haven't called our function in our setup yet. So we need to call make circles in our setup function. Getting ahead of myself. Make circles. Now when we go back here, now we see we have a little bit of an issue. Let's see what our issue is. Circle's not defined. It's a typo. I made a typo. CIRCLES. Save that. And now we see a bunch of circles everywhere. 750 might have been a little big, right? But if we kind of refresh a few times, we can see these circles change. And if you look really closely in the middle, maybe we can get that other logo. There's the other logo. We can see our other logo there. So 750 might have been a little big. I think I might want to change that. Maybe knock that down to be a smaller thing. Like I said, I was using 500 in my testing, so that's probably where we'll go. So let's head back over to our shapes file. We need to be in there anyway. And let's knock this down to, you know what, let's go down to 400 even and save that there. So now that looks a little different. We get more of that background showing through. And when we actually do the colors, we'll have it set up to where we can do different opacities, different alpha levels for each color. We have to do a little trick for that, which is kind of fun. Which we'll do, I guess, right now. Why not? And so I did this kind of earlier, right? So I kind of knew what I needed to do to make this work and to make this nice. Because the background of the site, the background of our element here is kind of that main blue. Like if we go to clevelandcc.edu, we can see we have that main kind of dark blue color here. We've got these three logo colors here. So we've got this dark blue, we've got this middle blue, and we've got this green. And so since I'm using the dark blue for the background color, I want to use the middle blue and the green for my circle colors. Right? And so one of the things that I was looking at earlier is trying to use the hex colors for these different colors to to work with that. But one of the things is it gets a little bit more difficult to deal with alpha when we're doing that. So what I did was I took them into another program and I converted those hex colors to their RGB values. And I thought, you know what might be interesting is if we took these colors and we made them into a two-dimensional array. That way, instead of like a hex value, we have a 2D array of our RGB colors. So we can set up a constant of colors here. So const colors, and set that equal to an array of arrays. So our first color is 88, comma 120, comma 68. And then we'll have 1, comma 140, comma 216. So this first color here is that green that we were looking at. The second one here is the light blue. So now I just kind of have to write something that will figure this out and give me one of these random colors. Right, so I decided to do this just a little bit differently. Right, and I'm going to create a new variable in our constructor. Right, and this is going to be really, I've done it one way in my notes here, and I'm trying to decide which one would be like the easier way. And I think maybe doing it again that same way might be the way to go. So what I might do here is kind of do the same thing that we did on the previous page with our logos. And just kind of copy these in here again. Like so. Get rid of that last comma. That way we get a little more randomness. And we have a this.fill color equals math.floor random 0 to 3. Right, so this will pull me back one of these index locations for this array here, right? And so when we have a 2D array, we have different arrays inside of our arrays. So of our main array, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 index locations. Index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3. In our subarray, we have 3 index locations, 0, 1, and 2. So we can use this random number here to pull back one of these arrays that are inside this array of array. And then we can just reference the index locations in our fill function. Right, so we'll go down here to our ellipse. We'll add a fill. We'll add our fill function here. Again, Visual Studio Code, trying to think it's doing what I want it to do when it's not. It'll be this dot fill color 0. Right, so this dot fill color is one of these arrays that is pulled out of this big array, and then I can take the index location of that. So that's the R, this dot fill color 1. That's the G, and this dot fill color 2. That's the B. And then we can add a fourth argument here for our opacity, or our alpha value here, and we can do that with random. And what I found in my testing kind of worked the best is 40 to 90% opacity. And that gives us everything we need. So now we're taking and we're making these different colors and different varying alpha values here as well. So this is really awesome, right? So now if we look at this on our site, what did we forget to do? Because that should be working. Let's change this from the random here to the other way we were doing it, which is the math.floor, math.random. Math.floor, math.random times 3. Let's try that. Let's check our inspect here and see if it's giving us any errors. It is not. Let's head back to this index here and save that. This definitely worked in testing, so let's try to figure this out. I've probably just made some kind of slight oversight here, which is causing me a headache. Let's get rid of these math.floor functions just to try to do as much as possible, although they're working. So I don't know why we'd have to worry about that. Fill, this dot fill color, this dot fill color, this dot fill color. That looks good. Oh, I see what I've done here. This should be colors with one of these in there. So we're pulling back my index location, but we're not telling it what index location of the index location of which array to pull it back from. I'm sure you all caught that and were yelling at me through the screen. My apologies. So we need to put our array here so it knows which subarray to pull back from which array, right? So otherwise it's not going to know what any of that means. So now if we look at our wallpapers, there we go. That's looking more like it. We need to get rid of those strokes. We'll do that in just a second. Right, but if we do this and we kind of refresh a few times, we can see it work. We might even want to make that a little bit bigger now that we've seen that. Go from 400 to 600 as the max size. And let's go ahead and get rid of that stroke by adding our no stroke function, our no stroke P5JS function right in there. So now if we see that, we can refresh this a few times and it's making our wallpaper for us, which is pretty cool. And we can right click and save one of these, right, if we wanted to. Like we can right click and save image as, and it'll bring up our dialog here and we can save it. But I'd like to make this a little bit better. So what I'd like to do is put in 2 key press events here. One of which will take and refresh our situation. Give us a new random wallpaper. The other will save the wallpaper. All right, so let's go back to our P5JS. Let's go back to our sketch file. In P5JS, we have a key pressed function that we can use that makes life really easy on us. So we'll write our function key pressed here. And again, you can look this up in the documentation if you want to get more information on it. But we can just use it really easy, really simply here. So this is a function. We can write a conditional here. If key equals n let's say, for new. All I want to do is run my setup function again. Now, this does create a problem, which I'll show you in just a second. All right, so we'll save this. All right, so this is going to rerun my setup function every time we press the N key. And so we can go to our site here and we can actually see that, right? If I press N, you can see that it's rerunning my setup function and adding more circles. Well, that's exactly what it's doing. It's adding more circles. Right? So we can't see the background anymore now because it's added all these circles. And so why is it doing that? Well, one of the things that we want to keep in mind here is that we're taking all of these circles in our make circles function and we're pushing them to this circles array. And then we're taking everything that's in that array and displaying a circle for it. So we're not resetting this circles function back to 0. So it's just adding additional circles to the circles that already exist. So when I start from scratch and press N 10 times, there's 1,100 circles on that page there that it's rendered, which is not what we're looking for here. We want to be able to see that background through it. So all we need to do when we do this key press as well is we just need to reset the values that are in that circles function. So we'll set this back to circles equals an empty array. And that's going to fix our problem here. Right, so we'll save this, we'll go backwards. And so now we can see the background here, and every time we hit N, 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 right, it's not adding all those additional circles anymore. We can still see the background. And so the idea here is that I can just sit here and hit N and have a good time enjoying myself. N for new, I guess, was my thought process there. Until I see a wallpaper that just strikes me. Like, oh, that's the one. That's the one that I want. That's the one I want to put on my system. And then I can take that wallpaper and, like I said, we could save it, right? We could right click and do save image as. But I'd like to do something else here, as I'd like to save the canvas. So let's add another key press function here. So we'll write an else if key equals S. So N to generate a new wallpaper, S to save. We will save canvas. In our save canvas method that's provided to us by P5JS, we use 2 arguments. We can use more than 2 arguments, but the one that I like to do uses 2 arguments. The first one is the name of the file that you want to save. In this case, we'll call it Yeti wallpaper. And the second is the file type. And you can save JPEGs or PNGs. So for this to be nice and high quality, we'll make it a PNG. And so there we have it. We'll save this. Now we'll head back to our site here. And we can start hitting N until we find something that we like. And it might take us a while, but it's cool, right? It's just generating us a random desktop wallpaper until we find the one that we want. I kind of like, let's say I kind of like this one. And I do. It's pretty cool. It's got a lot of cool shapes on it. Got an interesting display of a pattern here. And it's got that, it's got that Yeti's logo on it that I like. So now I can press the S key on my keyboard. And it was super quick there. Like you probably didn't even see it. It just downloaded. Right? It just downloaded to my computer. So now I can click that and it'll open up that Yeti's wallpaper. And I can save it as my desktop background. Right? And I can do this as much as I want. I can hit N or I can hit S as much as I want and save as many as I want. right? And we just get a random wallpaper. And it's a near infinite number of wallpapers here that we could work with, which is pretty cool. Now, I've talked to people, and they said they like the one that's all circles the best. But we can do something where it's not just circles, where we can do circles and squares as well. Or really, we could do circles in any other shapes. Right? That's why we named this our circles class, or our shapes class, instead of our circles class. Right? So one of the things that I could do here is upon generating this shape, I can just create a this dot shape selector and let that return to me a value that's between say 0 and 100. So this will make some of them, so we'll make some of them squares and some of them circles. Then we can just put a conditional statement in our display here and say if this dot shape selector is less than 50, we'll go ahead and let it be a circle. Otherwise, we'll just copy all of this. Copy this. Add an else condition in here, else. Paste that in there, and then we'll just change ellipse here to rect. So it'll be a rectangle. So if this random number that we're getting is less than 50, if it's from 0 to 49, it'll be a circle. If it's more than 50, if it's 50, or if it's more than 40, if it's 49 or higher, it'll be, or if it's 50 or higher, it'll be a rectangle. It'll be a square. And let's see here. I think I have an extra curly brace here. So we can save this now. And if we look at here, now we see we have some squares, some circles. And I kind of like the way that this looks. It kind of gives it a little bit of variation. And it also increases the possibilities for how many different wallpapers we could get out of this. Right? So we could get somewhere between, somewhere up to a near infinite number of wallpapers, since we have, a couple different shapes that we could have in a couple different colors that could be a bunch of different opacities that could be placed anywhere on this document. I like that one. I think that one's pretty cool. Let's save that one. And then we can just save it. And then we have it on our machine, so we can apply it to our desktop wallpaper, which is really neat, really cool. Right, and so this took us to almost the end of our time here, right? Like we almost did this one thing for an entire hour, which is pretty good, right? And we ended up with something cool out of it, right? So we saw a couple new things in P5JS that we haven't seen before, right? And we saw some things just in programming JavaScript in general that we haven't seen before, right? Like I did the object in a whole nother file here. I added in our key pressed function here for a press key event. I used arrays a lot more than I did last time. One of the things you'll notice, I did the images here. And one of the things that you probably noticed here, and you'll notice it even more next week during the game jam, is that we use random numbers a lot. Like when we get into this sort of thing, when we're doing like this sort of artistic programming or games especially, most games just kind of break down to a random number generator. Right? Like if you think about, like say paper, rock, scissors. Like one of the things that there is about paper, rock, scissors is essentially that it's just a random number generator, right? And based on the random number that the computer picks, it's going to throw paper, rock, or scissors. And then, like, the more you get into, like, more advanced games, the more you realize, wait a minute, this is just a glorified version of that, which is just a random number generator. So this is just an even bigger random number generator. Right? Like the example I give often is Pokemon. Right? Pokemon has the different types, and different types have different advantages over other types. Right? So really, when you look at it, like Pokemon is really just a hyper advanced paper, rock, scissors. And there's a lot of random number generation that's going on in there. And so in this case, to kind of make something truly unique each time we press our N key, you know, it gives us this totally random, totally unique thing, which is pretty cool. And we end up with our really awesome sort of program here that does something interesting for us, which is make a completely random wallpaper that we could put on our desktops. And what could be even cooler is if you could tie this to, say, another event, like if you were to do like a web scraping thing that would load this page and scrape it maybe every day. And then you could download that wallpaper and maybe put it on to, like if you worked here, the virtual machines. So the virtual machines would have a different wallpaper every single day. Might be something interesting to do there, you know? Just some kind of stuff to think about. So again, as we wrap up here, you know, this week, you know, you've got your P5JS assignment that's going to be due on Sunday. It's pretty open-ended, right? I basically let you do whatever you want for this assignment. So it's cool. Next week, we'll have the game jam, which should be a good time. I've got kind of an idea in mind for a game that I think I want to make. So that should be pretty fun. We'll hang out in the chat with the music playing just a little while longer, just in case anybody who might be here with me live has any questions. If you're watching the recording here and you have any questions, please let me know. But that's all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.